We bring you an exclusive interview with a woman who, like Annika said, has been called the Jane Goodall of chameleon conservation. She is Wits University's honorary researcher, Professor Krystal Tolley. She led a team of South African conservationists to Malawi to find out if the very rare Chapman's Pygmy chameleon was still alive in the wild and not extinct as previously assumed. And so today, the professor can reveal to us live right now that she found one of the world's rarest chameleons clinging for survival in the rainforests of South Malawi. Professor, thank you so much for your time. So as I understand it, you went and searched for the Chapman's Pygmy chameleon back in 2014, thought it was extinct, went back 7 years later, and then found the chameleon. What did that feel like?
Well, more or less, that's what happened, but we did actually not search for it earlier in 2014 directly. We used Google Earth images to look at whether or not there was still forest left where the chameleon was supposed to live. And the forest patches were really very, very small, so we weren't sure if it could survive in such small forest patches. So we did then go there in 2016 and have a look in those forest patches. And we didn't know what to expect at first, obviously. We didn't know if the forest would be intact enough to house chameleon populations, or if there would be just a few left. And it turns out that there were some forest patches that were just large enough to still have them. So we found them on the very first night. We searched for chameleons at night because, believe it or not, they're easier to see at night. If you use a torch, you can just shine it into the bushes and they'll sort of stand out against the vegetation. So we found them, and of course it was very exciting. We ran around and jumped around and hopped on one foot even, just because we were very excited to find the first one. And then we looked for several nights in a row in different forest patches and found them in each of the tiny patches that are left.
I imagine it was like 2 days before payday finding a 200 Rand note in some random pair of pants that you didn't expect. And the excitement must have been quite wild, like you say. You work for the National Biodiversity Institute. Explain to people why finding a chameleon like the Chapman's Pygmy is important for biodiversity and why biodiversity is important to humans.
Yeah, so the chameleon it's important itself, obviously, because it's a living creature, it's a species, and we do want to protect all species and not have them go extinct. But we can kind of perhaps think of the chameleon as a spokesperson or maybe a spokes animal for the globe, for biodiversity, that it is representative of the general things that have been happening over the last decades in terms of habitat loss. And it itself has been shrunken down. The populations have shrunken down to very small, probably about 80% of what they used to be. Have lost about 80% of the original extent of forests. So the chameleon populations probably have shrunk down by about 80% as well. And that means we're losing not just chameleons, but the plants, the other animals in the forest, birds, and also the forest itself they are important ecosystems, especially in Africa, because they attract rainfall. A forest attracts rainfall. And if the forest is no longer there, the rain won't be attracted, the clouds won't be attracted, and the rain won't fall, and we lose out, having water. So for humans, forests are important from that aspect because they are the kind of ecosystem that helps us. It keeps us going by providing us water, really. And so it's more of a bigger thing, and the chameleon speaks for us.
What do you suggest we do now to keep these creatures thriving?
Well, I think that it would be really important to have a program that engages the local community that lives around the forest. I mean, they're struggling because they need to plant their crops. And the more people that are there, so the bigger the population grows, the more land they need to plant their crops. And if they could be engaged to sort of instead of destroying the forest, to help replant it, for example, and reconnect it, and have a bigger program where we could incentivize them even financially to protect the forest and to regrow it, and that could offset their need as well for they need to survive too. So offset them somehow by helping them, involving them in the process. So it would take quite a strong, a big group effort to do that, I think, but it is still possible.
Professor Tolley, I have to ask you this, and I said to you just before the interview, just before we started, that this is my first ever chameleon interview. So how did you end up becoming Professor Tolley, chameleon hunter?
It was by accident. Africa is my adopted home. So I came here. I was going to stay for a year and do a project, and that was 20 years ago. And the project was on chameleons, and it just kind of happened by accident. And I loved it here so much, and the animals and the place and the people, that I didn't want to leave. So that's how I became chameleon hunter. Completely random, really.
Well, congratulations on your find, Professor. It's a very, very big win for biodiversity. And like you explained, biodiversity, of course, links directly to the survival of the human species. We appreciate your time. That was Wits University's honorary researcher and principal scientist at the National Biodiversity Institute, Professor Krystal Tolley, on the amazing rediscovery of the Chapman's pygmy chameleon in Malawi, a big win in the conservation fight.
I mean, people wonder why we did this interview and why it's interesting, but they really are a barometer for the health of the Earth.
Exactly.
I like them because I think they look like little baby dinosaurs.